Hey guys, welcome back to One Shot Cophine's fanfiction review. Today we will be reviewing the first place winner for the First Annual Fanfiction Competition. It's a one-shot by the name of Your Loving Jack by Trylonandperisphere. Now, before we get into the review, I just want to very quickly express my extreme amount of gratitude to everyone who tuned into the debut, who've reblogged it, commented on it, given me your feedback. The reception far exceeded any of the expectations that I had for this thing. I really appreciate it, so thank you all very much for that. Also, I think I'm gonna try and continue with a similar format to the debut review. So intro with some background about the author, give first impressions on the story, as well as any real life tidbits if there are any, do a brief overview, then finish up with my thoughts on the writing as a whole, and then give our shout outs at the very end. Which of course, I don't have any shout outs for the fic contest winners because I forgot to ask. But feel free to reblog with your love and comments. That would be much appreciated. But with that said, let's get this show on the road. Trylonandperisphere is another O.B. Frankenfics author. As far as AO3 goes, she tends to write exclusively Orphan Black fic, most of which are standalone, but of course there are the collaborative works with OBF. I have several favorites by this author, most notably The Swan and the Dove, which is the World War II AU I mentioned at the end of the previous podcast, but also the Silent Retreat series. Silent Retreat 1 is complete. She's currently working on Silent Retreat 2 when the world breaks through. I highly recommend that series if you've not read it, and I do hope to cover it in a future broadcast. So moving on to the review, Your Loving Jack was, of course, the first place entry. As far as impressions and real life tidbits go, this story made me cry like a little bitch at the end, which we'll get to why later on. The setup for this story was extremely unique and ridiculously clever, especially in manipulating the word count, I suppose you could say. So the summary kind of sets the stage for this fic in that it tells us that what we are reading are Civil War letter transcripts that date back to the 1860s, and throughout the story there are a series of blank lines where text is missing, and the summary just lets us know that these lines are denoting damage within the letters that could not be transcribed. As for the letters, we have a total of 7, 6 of which are from Cosima, and the final one is from Delphine. So in the first letter, we learn that Cosima is a nurse who's recently taken post at a hospital and, of course, quickly earned her place by saving a patient from quote-unquote under the nose of a respected surgeon. And we learn that she is in the midst of a war, and she is describing to Delphine the terrible, unsanitary conditions of the hospital in which she's in. We also learn at the end of this letter that Cosima has apparently disembarked on a mission to bring home their young men, as she puts it, and it's implied that she may not have left on the best of terms with Delphine. Going into the next letter, though we don't see Delphine's reply, we learn that she gave Cosima quite the scolding, but also expressed her understanding for the situation. We also learn that the young men that Cosima is searching for are actually Felix and Laurent, her and Delphine's younger brothers. Cosima's recently caught wind that they are located in a regiment further south from where she is stationed, but getting transferred to a closer hospital would take far too much time and petitioning. She does find a solution, however, while treating another soldier by the name of John, whom she discovers to be a woman in disguise as a man in order to participate more directly in the war effort. So this so-called John aids Cosima in taking on her own male persona, a courier boy by the name of Jack Willow. Cosima also mentions teaming up with a former slave turned scout by the name of Arthur, aka Art, and she sends Delphine her love and signs off with her new name. The third letter provides a bit of introspection. In response to Delphine's concerns over Cosima's ploy to go undercover, Cosima muses over the fact that men would rather kill than put their potential to more constructive use, and she refuses to let Felix and Laurent waste their own potential in such a way. Cosima describes to Delphine her disguise, expressing a fondness for trousers, and a bittersweet feeling over the cutting of her hair. Would Delphine find gender-bent Cosima handsome? I think so. In the fourth letter, Cosima and Art have reached the field hospital, and we're given insight into Cosima's past as she reveals that a camp along the way reminded her of her days spent in her youth with Felix, and that apparently the two were relieved from a life of whoring and thievery by Delphine and her father. Definitely a part of the story I'd like to know more about. The letter then goes on to describe the horrors of the field hospital, far more gruesome than Cosima's previous post, and before signing off, Cosima mentions that Felix and Laurent appear to be in a nearby unit. The next letter is especially interesting in that we see a typically uncharacteristic religious side of Cosima, juxtaposed to the scientist side we all know and love. Pushing on through another unit, Cosima faces like an ever-increasing death toll, and the casualties she faces has her both questioning the existence of God while simultaneously reflecting on the evolutionary theories of Darwin and the ways in which war has evolved alongside of man, advancing but still reflecting their primitive, animalistic nature. And after this thought, Cosima goes on to say what is probably my favorite quote from this fic. She says, "For what is war but man's own evolutionary invention, with metal and gunpowder to replace teeth and brute strength? Each side claims God in their favor, yet both suffer and die. I speak of God in prayer, yet I doubted both on that ride. What just creator would allow?" And the line fades off, and then it picks back up and it says, "Then I thought of you, and it seemed a confirmation of the light of the Holy Soul." And that last line had me swooning. And then at the very end of this letter, we find out why Delphine was agitated with Cosima in the very first letter. Not only did Cosima leave, but she left without a word. So at the end of this letter, she asks for Delphine's forgiveness and speaks of her determination to see her again soon. Then finally, in Cosima's last letter, she finds Felix and Laurent and presents them with some fake papers, convinces them to return with her, and so she's on her way home. She alludes to their affection for one another, and just as she's informing Delphine of what she'll do once they reach the city, the letter cuts off, and that is the end of Cosima's telling. And I knew going into this that the last letter was going to be from Delphine. I just knew it. And it wasn't the French that gave it away. But in the last letter, we find out that Cosima has been injured. We don't know how. We don't know how seriously she's been injured, but we do know that she is healing, at least. There's a lot missing from this letter also, so it leaves a lot of questions. But Delphine tells Cosima that she set up an office of ladies' medicine. They have employment opportunities for Arthur when he's ready to leave, and she's saying that she looks forward to being quote-unquote old maids with Cosima. I think something may have happened between Laurent and Felix and Papa Cormier, but I don't really know exactly what that is, only that Delphine says that lessons are to be learned if of discretion. So I'm thinking perhaps they got busted being together. And then Delphine closes out the letter talking about basically how she wants to spend the rest of her life with Cosima and she wants to take care of her, and bless, she closes saying that she forgives Cosima of everything and just promises never to leave and begs her to come back home. And it breaks my fucking heart because it's still really ambiguous. Like, this letter was found with Delphine's letters from Cosima, so the question is, did Delphine send this letter and it gets sent back because Cosima wasn't available to receive it because she died? Did Delphine never get to send the letter because Cosima died? Did she never get to send the letter because Cosima came home beforehand? Like, so many questions. And I know this was a one-shot fic contest, but Trylonandperisphere, I do implore you, please make this a two-shot. Or post the letters with the missing spaces. And I know you took some out to meet the word limit, so I would be interested in seeing what you had before you started erasing lines, just out of pure curiosity. So that's the end of the summary of the story. It turned out quite a bit lengthier than I anticipated. If you guys feel like that is incredibly boring, let me know and I'll definitely keep that in mind with the next reviews. But that said, we're gonna move on, and my thoughts on the writing of this piece. Oh dear God. Okay, so you're gonna hear me say this probably 100,000 times so long as I keep doing these reviews, but characterization to me in a fic is everything. Like, doesn't matter how good the fic is, if the characterization feels off, it doesn't matter how good the writing is or the plot, the whole story is going to feel off. And the thing with Trylonandperisphere's writing that never fails to impress me is the characterization is always so flawless. Because when you're writing a canon fic, it's so easy to write these characters in their element. You know, you've got scientist Cosima, scientist Delphine, crazy science. They're in the zone, and in comparison to an AU, it's so much easier to take those mannerisms and put them to words. But when you have AUs like this, where the historical context is so vastly different, but to still be able to really capture the essence of these characters, Trylon just does it so well, like, holy shit. Because, I mean, perfect example, the letter in which Cosima is reflecting on her religious beliefs and comparing them to her scientific beliefs. You know, in canon, Cosima isn't religious, but back in this time period, religion was such a strong thing back then. So it would almost be out of character for Cosima to have been very atheist in this faith-based society. And while you can do all the research and, determine whether or not a religious aspect would be characteristic of someone living in this period, that doesn't tell you how to translate it from, okay, you have Geek Monkey Cosima, how do you take that essence and turn it into 1800s, war zone, nurse, scientistic, religious Cosima? No amount of research can tell you how to do that. And it takes so much skill, and it's done so seamlessly that even though you have this completely different character, the essence still rings true. And it's just something she does so consistently in all of her writing, no matter the context. And I'm just so in love with her work, especially because of that. But moving on, I feel like this fic did such an amazing job at fulfilling the prompt of Lost Time, because the mention of time was so minimal. Like, I think there was that one line in the very beginning apologizing for the amount of time that had transpired before the letter was sent. But other than that, it's the lost time just lies within the story itself. You see that they're apart and they're trying to fill in the gaps with these letters, but that doesn't really make up for the time that is being lost. And then you add on the literal take on it where things are erased due to damage, and I just thought that was so fucking clever. And then you gotta top it off with Delphine's letter at the end that just shatters me to pieces, because they lose even more time, and it's because Cosima could be freaking dying or something, which just they can never catch a break, so it just plays upon my weary shipper heart. And lastly, I just want to mention that the pace and flow of this fic was exceptional. It left me feeling as if I had read a very long multi-chapter fic, even though it was only 2,500 words. And as far as placing in the competition, that really held a lot of weight as well, because the word count was intended to be the real challenge. I know you were daunted by it, but you really killed it. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up, but I leave you with my favorite moment and two more of my favorite quotes. My favorite moment is actually in the last letter when we find out Cosima was injured, because I'm the biggest masochist on the face of this planet, and it was extremely unexpected, and it really hit me right in the heartstrings, and I do enjoy reading things that do that, so it was definitely my favorite moment. And then my favorite quote, because I'm full of sin, is in the third letter where Cosima is describing her new masculine disguise to Delphine, and she says, "Never worry, I shall not cease to wear skirts. After all, what greater pleasures have I had than under yours?" That just cracked me up, so I love that. And then my other favorite quote is actually French in the last letter, so I'm not going to try and say it, but when I put it in Google Translate, it translated to "my bad boy," which I found highly amusing. I think well-placed French is important in Cophine fic, and I felt that was spot on for the tone of the story. And that is officially all for this review. Thank you again to Trylonandperisphere for your amazing entry, and also thank you to anyone who tuned in today. Keep an eye out tomorrow. I hope to have up the review for Promethean Thieves by Yes Both Ways. If you check out the links below, I'll have the link to Promethean Thieves posted, as well as Your Loving Jack, so you can revisit the story or check it out if you've not yet read it. Also included is the link to Trylonandperisphere's Patreon account. If you are unfamiliar with Patreon, it's kind of like an online tip jar for writers, artists, things of that nature, so if you like the story, if you like her work, just drop by, leave a tip, leave your love, and let her know what you think. But that's it. I am gonna go to bed now. Good morning and good night, and thank you all so much.